Hello friends, once again welcome to bisptrainings.com. My name is Amit and today I am going to show you how to build OBI RPD keeping role playing dimension. So it's a part of our OBI dimension building classes and we have been continuing using our HR model. So we are building our HR model in 4 steps. Step number 1, we will build RPD repository which is called semantic data model. Then we prepare reports and dashboard, and then we allow my user to create self-service report, enable business user create self-service report, and at final step we'll do the predictive analytics, the 4 step activity. This is our HR model. We have been working since beginning, and if you look at this, we've been working on the fact called employee expense fact, and there are a couple of dimensions. This model talk about employee direct and indirect expenses. So today we are focusing on role playing dimension. Before we see how to build a role-playing dimension, the need of role-playing dimension in HR model, let's see what is role-playing dimension. As you look at over here, in this example, the role-playing dimension as per definition, role-playing dimension refers to the dimension that play multiple roles, different roles, depending on the context. This is a nice and simple example. I have a fact table called sales fact and time dimension. Sales fact and time dimension join using 3 keys, using order key, order placed, ship key, and close key. So if you look at some measures like quantity, the quantity ordered, quantity shipped, and close key. So when you do a BI reporting on top of this model, it doesn't work appropriately. So from a user point of view, this dimension has to split into 3 phases. 3 roles I need to play, make a 3 roles for my time dimension. One would be order key, ship date, order date, ship date, and close date. The dimension remains same, but we got 3 alias of it. From a user point of view, it make it easy. Whenever I like to find out the information pertaining to order, I would refer this information pertaining to ship and information pertaining to closing. I would refer 3 different dimensions according to the query I need to bring. Let's see how to implement the same into our HR model. In our HR model, we have got employee expense fact table and I have got employee dimension. If you see, my employee key is joining with 3 dimension. Dimension 3 keys. Employee key is joining with my employee dimension using employee key, manager key, and 1 over manager. Right. The same fact table joins with my same dimension using 3 different key: employee, manager, and 1 over manager. So if I look at my employee expenses, I would like to see the same employee expenses in the context of individual employee, employee manager, and 1 over manager. So in order to find the solution, let's build a whole model step by step. First, I'm going to bring the metadata into my RPD. I'll connect to my data source and bring the metadata. So import metadata. My source is in Oracle, therefore I use OCI connection. My source name, the username, HR model, and the password. I'm going to bring dimension keys and foreign keys, and therefore I use over here my HR model. This is my HR model. I need a fact table called employee expense fact. In addition to this, I need a dimension called employee dimension, and I need keys from employee, account, finance, time dimension, and organization, dim time, and organization dim. I'll bring the metadata, define a model, username and password. Okay. It takes few more minutes or seconds to bring this metadata because the system is reading all the dimension keys, join, constraint, therefore it takes some time. It is done. So our physical model is ready. Let's see how it look like. You right click and visualize this physical model. So let's look at the physical view of it. Right click, look at the physical diagram. I could see my dimension called employee expenses and employee. I know it is small enough to view. So let's focus on employee expense and employee. Now look at this employee dimension carefully. There are 3 joins. The employee key joins with employee key, it joins with employee key, it joins with manager key, and it joins with 1 over manager. So same employee dimension joined with manager, employee, and 1 over manager. Right? So I'm going to create 3 alias. Before we solve this problem, let's see what is the default view for this data model. This is the default view of this data model. Let me create a presentation in business model mapping layer simply by drag and drop, and we visualize this model. I like to see employee expenses pertaining to individual employee, manager, and 1 over manager. So I go to my analysis. Because I modify my model, I'm going to save it, refresh it, refresh your model. Right, your model is ready. So one more thing, because you have a facts, therefore it is good to aggregate your measures. Employee expenses, I'm going to aggregate this. You can right click, go properties, and aggregate this. And then I'm going to apply first test, employee expenses. So I simply bring employee name, employee first name, employee name, and expenses, employee expense fact. Look at the result. I found the output. Let's look at the query. So right now my query is fairly simple. It is going to be employee. It is bringing your expenses with respect to employee, and joining criteria is employee key. Let's copy and keep this query ready. We're going to compare. So I copy this query in my notepad. So this is context 1. I can define context 1, employee expenses. Now I have to find out manager expenses and 1 over manager. So I'll do it manager expenses in the same fashion we can do for 1 over manager. So I like to say manager expenses. Okay. So how do you do this? In OBIEE we can solve this problem by creating alias. Right click the dimension which is causing multiple roles and create alias. Create alias. Alias is nothing, it's just an alternate name. I'm going to name it as manager dim. Right, and define the new key to this. So manager dim key is a manager name, manager key. So when I drag and drop, the system should be able to figure out on what column is supposed to join manager key, and the column I map to manager key. In a similar fashion, you can create one more alias for employee called 1 over manager. Right click, create new alias, call 1 over manager, and create a key of it. So I call 1 over manager key and define the column. 1 over manager seems to be absolutely bottom, so it's a 1 over manager key. Right, I got two alias, manager, 1 over manager. I right click and define join. Go to physical model, I got manager and 1 over manager. So I join with my fact table. Because I already have a key over there, I just have to drag and define join. So I define manage employee, employee manager, and 1 over manager. Let's create a new join. Simple drag and drop. And remember, the joining criteria is a manager key join with employee key. Manager key of manager dimension join with employee key of my fact table. Right? You can take a snapshot of this and keep it here. So when we query this, we can compare. Similarly, I do for 1 over manager. I simple define join, and my joining criteria is 1 over the manager key equals to employee key, right? Take a snapshot of this as well. So when I render the query, I could compare with a snapshot. Done. Now my physical model is ready. I'm going to create one more HR model. This I call a single instance. I rename this and call single instance, and I create multiple instance or multi with alias. Single instance, and I drag and drop once again and name it as with alias. Right, so I got two instances of employee. One is manager, another one is one over manager. Look at the presentation view of it. It is consistent. Look at the presentation view. So I got employee, manager, and one over manager. Right, now let's do the final test. I go to my answer request and render the query once again. So I should refresh it first. Refresh your model view and metadata both. And now go to your new, and you see single instance and multiple instance with alias. I use with alias. So I use employee, manager name. Here I could see manager name. Right, its employee is basically context change, therefore it's a manager name. And employee expense, total expense. Total expense is not aggregated, so I simply aggregate it. Right click and apply aggregation. Go to properties and aggregate this. And drag and drop employee expenses. Look at the result. I could see the output. I'm more concerned about the query. So right now the join would have taken place based on manager key. Right, this is my query. Now I can compare. This is based on employee and this is based on manager key. Right, you can also copy paste this query and put it beside your data model, isn't it? So you could see over here the join is based on manager key. It is pretty small, so we're not able to see the whole window, but I could see employee join with manager key. This is our joining criteria. Right, so you can highlight this to make it even more easy to understand. This is joining criteria employee with manager key, and accordingly the query rendered. The same thing you can do with one over manager. So I'm going to run it once again in the third context called one over manager. So I write a new query, HR model with analysis. I use one over manager name, and expenses, uh, employee expense. Right, this is one over manager expense. Result, I got the output. Look at the query. So this is my query, and the moral of the story, now it is joining on one over manager key. This is third context. Right, so look at these three contexts carefully. This is how we can implement role based dimension. One over manager expenses. When I join with manager expenses, joining criteria is employee key both the side. Otherwise employee key and manager key, the joining criteria become employee and manager key. And here joining criteria become employee key and one over manager key. So this is how you can implement role based dimension. So thanks for watching today's video. Should you have any training and consulting requirement, please feel free to visit to our site. It is bisptrainings.com or bispsolutions.com. Thank you and have a great day ahead.